Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 158th episode of Old Romans Unscripted, entitled Contra impugnantes. Contra impugnantes. But before I bring on our panelist, let's begin in prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Hello, Father Thomas. How are you?
Very Grace. Doing well. Up here in the frigid north, it's cold, and we had an unexpected snowstorm. Apparently, it wasn't forecasted at all, and so we're in the midst of getting another few inches of snow to already a bunch of snow that has been had up here in the UP. Apologies if you hear snowblowers running. Neighbors are out clearing our walkways and all that. I got to do a little bit of shoveling. I definitely found out it's a lot easier to shovel when you're in your teenager years than when you're in your mid-30s.
Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And to all of you, our viewers as well, please don't be shy. Say hi, post in the comments. Let us know where you're viewing from. Hello to Peggy. Nice to see the regulars present. Good evening to, that's actually Barbara. I know that's Barbara because only Barbara lives just across the valley from me. Greetings to Father Philip in Macedonia. Greetings to you, Father. Please do say hi. And as I say, let us know where you're viewing from, because it's always fascinating and interesting to know how widespread our viewership is. Now, today is the 700th anniversary of the canonization of St Thomas Aquinas. And in France today, there was a special ceremony where the relic, which the skull of St Thomas, was transferred to a new reliquary. And that made me think about St Thomas and made me recall past days of seminary lectures and reading great tomes by the sainted, well, indeed, angelic doctor of the church. And it reminded me of one of the titles of his books, Contra impugnantes Dei cultum et religionem, translated against those who assail the worship of God and religion. Now, it was actually a treatise about those who were assailing the religious life. But as a title, I think it is a good one for discussing the present situation in the church. Just a few more hellos before we continue. Hello to Mary in frigid Escanaba, she's literally just over the way from Father Thomas. That's his mother. And
yes, she's literally right there.
Yeah, and hello to Nicola in upstate New York. Lovely. Oh, very welcome. So concerning the situation in the church today, the headlines, of course, just keep coming. Lots of revelations going on post the post-mortem of Benedict XVI, by which I don't mean after an examination of his cadaver, but rather after his death. All sorts of revelations are coming to light in Rome. And we touched on some of those, I think, last week. But concerning the present situation in the church today. Father Thomas, what do you think Aquinas would have made of the present situation?
Well, your first mistake, Your Grace. You're asking a Franciscan to talk about a Dominican.
Yeah, but you are called Thomas.
I was named after Didymus, not the great theologian Aquinas. But I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I remember when I was in Novice Ordo Seminary, you didn't talk about Aquinas. Like, that was a shocking thing. Like, there was only one school that I remember attending, and it was in Minneapolis, and it was named after St. Thomas Aquinas. And even there, if you actually bring up his writings and works, you were kind of looked upon differently. Like, there was this negativity to St. Thomas Aquinas. Because obviously you look at his writings, and not just, the Summa, but you look at like this, like what we're talking about today, and how he just, he elaborated so on point, you couldn't refute it. And if you did, it was in clear opposition. You made yourself known to be clearly opposed to what the church's teaching is and what the magisterium and tradition. And it's not saying he's 100% always right on everything, but it's just interesting because you see how the writings of St. Thomas are today. And it's what would he say if he was here right now? And honestly, I don't think he would have much to say to be shocking. I think he would just know that we are in times prophesized, that when our Lord said, the few, the elect, will be even deceived. I think he will see that and take that for a sign that we're living in, the end times of the church.
Yeah, it is interesting what you say about your experience in the Novus Ordo Seminary. I'm just going to read from Doctoris Angelici, which is by St. Pius X, and in which he writes, "We therefore desired that all teachers of philosophy and sacred theology should be warned that if they deviated so much as a step in metaphysics, especially from Aquinas, they exposed themselves to grave risk. We now go further and solemnly declare that those who in their interpretations misrepresent or affect to despise the principles and major theses of his philosophy are not only not following St. Thomas, but are even far astray from the saintly doctor. If the doctrine of any writer or saint has ever been approved by us or our predecessors with such singular commendation, and in such a way that to the commendation were added an invitation and order to propagate and defend it, it may easily be understood that it was commended to the extent that it agreed with the principles of Aquinas or was in no way opposed to them. We have deemed it our apostolic duty to make this declaration and order, so that the clergy, both regular and secular, may clearly know our will and mind in a matter of the gravest importance, and fulfill our desire with the appropriate alacrity and diligence. Teachers of Christian philosophy and sacred theology will be particularly zealous in this respect, for they must bear in mind that they have not been entrusted with the duty of teaching in order to impart to their pupils whatever opinions they please, but to instruct them in the most approved doctrines of the Church." And
it's just interesting because, obviously if they were to listen to St. Pius X, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. And while you were quoting St. Pius X, I couldn't help remember, I'll take this for a grain of salt. I can't verify anything except just what the words of a priest said. But everybody knows one of the most infamous canceled priests right now out there, Father Altman. He was saying in one of his talks on the Fatima Center, when he was having a conversation with his bishop, he's like, he pretty much said to the bishop said to him, he's like, you're riling up feathers because we as bishops haven't been doing our job, paraphrasing. And then, it just shows you right there that even some of the bishops realize, wait, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing as bishops, but yet we can't go against the grain of the council. We can't offend the Vatican II's spirit. We can't offend our ecumenical councils and our jurisdictions and our ordinaries, like the USCCB and so on and so forth, all those other councils. It's like, it just shows that the times that we're in, where if you even have a relatively sane thought, you're almost the enemy. Like you can't, whether you're a religious, a prelate, a seminarian, or just a lay person, we can't think anymore. And what was it? Chesterton said, it's like common sense isn't so common anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the revelations, of course, that came out this week was a book by Benedict XVI that he desired to be published posthumously, meaning after his death. It's at the moment still only available in Italian, but the title is "What is Christianity?" And of course, in it, he makes reference to the state and condition of the hierarchy in the church today, and notes particularly heresies amongst the bishops.
Well, and it's interesting, because when we look at Pope Benedict XVI, it's he's often quoted saying, my jurisdiction ends at that door, and he pointed to to the door right outside of his papal office, in the sense that the popes in recent time have abdicated their authority. They and that's sad, because when you lay down your arms in the fight, you're vulnerable. And the vulnerableness that we're seeing within the magisterium of the church, within the people that hold the offices that are supposed to keep the church strong, they're not fighting anymore. They don't have the desire to fight, or they just want to give in. They want to be best friends with everybody. They want to be friends with the world, and they want to forsake anything they have within Catholicism. And it's one of those things where it's like, and who's suffering? The faithful. Countless souls are being led astray. Countless souls are possibly going to hell, or at least spending more time in purgatory than if they were given the truths of the faith and able to live a traditional Catholic life. I mean, we're not called to be mediocre. We're called to be saints. And I just pray, and I pray daily. My heart goes out to poor souls that don't know anything, that don't have the sense of tradition, that can't experience it, that hopefully they will not be held to too rigid of a judgment, that the mercy of God can be applied there, that they're trying to be Catholics, they're trying to live through this modernistic heresy that we're facing, and they don't have the option for tradition. They don't have it. Hopefully they can get it before it's too late. But it's because we've had conversations many times. When you're struggling with whatever crosses you have in your life, what brings you solace, what brings you comfort, what brings you strength is tradition. People give this notion that tradition is rigid and it's harmful, it's damning to hell, it's fire and brimstone, it's all this negativity. No, tradition actually helps you. It strengthens you. It gives you resources you need to overcome vice and see the virtue and attach yourself to virtue. And now you may struggle. You may struggle for years, decades, your rest of your life, but you're struggling. And that's the most important part. There's a difference between struggling and accepting sin.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think, one of the things I always say to people who voice that sort of opinion is that, the best way to understand or appreciate tradition is, tradition is 2,000 years of collective lived experience of the faith. And, that's the combined wisdom of 2,000 years of scholarly endeavor, of spiritual warfare, of personal development, of devotions, prayers, customs, things that have, for 2,000 years, enabled souls to attain heaven. And not just
other thing,
heaven, but in this life, live saintly lives.
And to add on to that, it's organically grown. It's organically. Tradition builds upon tradition. There's nothing that comes from the 2,000 years that is a break. And we see the break within modernism. We see the harsh breaks when it comes to, Martin Luther, when it comes to Anglicanism, when it comes to the Vatican getting its own center of power within, the way certain councils were called, ran, and delegated, and all that, the irregularities, canonical irregularities. That's attachment to modernism. That's where you see the shift of the heresies coming into play, not the 2,000 years organic development that is what we call tradition. Where you have the saints, the doctors of the East and the West that together, say the same truth. They come at it from maybe different charisms, but they're speaking the same truth. There's no, difference. There's no arguments that can be made between what those doctors are saying. They're just helping people come from at it different charisms. And it's beautiful. Like we just celebrated St. Polycarp. And St. John Chrysostom the other day, two great saints of the East. And yet we still recognize them in the West, and we still read their writings, it just shows the beauty, the wholeness of it. And, it's the meats and the potatoes. And who doesn't love good meats and potatoes? I mean, you can't get enough of it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And, this is what we regard as the rupture that we see with Vatican II. Pius X goes on in his letter there to say how you can, after the death of Aquinas, see his presence at every council of the church since. Now, that's up to the beginning of the 20th century. But one of the things you do notice as a Thomist, reading, for example, comparing the declarations of the Council of Trent to Vatican II, there's a clear absence of the kind of logic and philosophy that would betoken Aquinas. Now, that's not to say that there weren't Thomists at the Second Vatican Council. There were, and indeed the majority of the bishops there were probably still taught Aquinas in the seminary. But there was this, unaccountable spirit of the age that seemed to enter the council, which we know came primarily through the younger clergy who were present, who were the periti, or the advisors to the bishops. they who redrafted the documents, and who have since confessed that they deliberately used ambiguous terms and language, so that things would get through that later they would be able to correctly interpret. And people forget perhaps that Ratzinger himself, Benedict XVI, was one of those periti, and he even admits that things were done and things were said and things were manipulated that shouldn't have been at the council. But even then, there is a kind of disconnect between what the council finally publishes in its apostolic constitutions and dogmatic articles with that later interpretive spirit of Vatican II. So that, we see this, lex orandi, lex credendi. We see in the 1965 interim missal, we recognize the Mass. We recognize the Mass of the Ages. It's the same form, structure, contains the same words, etc.
I don't know.
Less than 10 years later, we have this Novus Ordo Missae, which bears little or no resemblance to the Mass of the Ages.
Your Grace, do you know that we have one of those 65 missals at the friary?
No, I've got one here.
I know, it's just fascinating to go through it sometimes, and you're just like, you just see the rupture. Like, I just found that interesting. Little tidbit information.
Yeah, but you'll know that there's not that much rupture. I mean, there's not that much difference.
No, there's not.
62. There's considerable difference between the 62 and the pre-55, of course. But you can still see, you can still see the form and structure of the Mass.
Which is interesting, because often you hear so many of these other Catholic commentators, they say, well, I attend the Mass of St Thomas Aquinas, and they're talking about the 62 missal, and I'm like, no, you don't. Like, St Thomas Aquinas would not look at the 62 missal and think that it was the same Mass he was saying. And that's the scary part, is so many people don't know the changes from Pius X to 62 and how many times the missal was changed. Like, if you want to hear the Mass, or as a priest, if you want to offer the Mass that St. Thomas Aquinas offered, get in touch with us. We'll show you we'll explain the Ordo, and we'll because the Mass that we offer as Old Romans and the Mass that the faithful attend at Old Roman chapels, that's it. That's your St. Thomas Aquinas Mass.
Well,
I mean, for the most part, yeah.
For the most part. I mean, bearing in mind the Dominicans had their own rite as well.
I mean, minus the Dominican rite, the Roman. Again, you're asking a Franciscan talking about Dominicans here.
Yeah. I mean, and as you said, as you referred to earlier, and which Benedict himself, Ratzinger, talked about, that organic development of tradition, and particularly, with regard to the development of liturgy. We see, you can look back over the centuries and you can trace the development and progression of the Roman Rite. But again, and then you come across, then you come to the Novus Ordo Missae, and you see that complete rupture with what went on before. And the most significant aspect is the fact that previously the various codifications and revisions of the Missal didn't involve promulgating a new Missal. And that's the major difference with the Novus Ordo Missae, the new order of Mass, was that it was something completely new. I mean, it's there to see.
And just to maybe get back to St. Thomas Aquinas a little bit. If anybody's interested or anybody has a devotion to Holy Hour, to going to adoration, you will appreciate St. Thomas Aquinas a little bit more. And maybe you don't even know it, but here's a little tidbit of information next time you go to Holy Hour. Most of the Eucharistic hymns that are chanted before the Blessed Sacrament were written by St. Thomas Aquinas. And you can see that if you look into Missal, the hymnal, it should say St. Thomas Aquinas as the author. Tantum Medico, O Salutaris Hodie, and so many other great Eucharistic meditations. There's prayers to be said before Mass, before you receive Holy Communion, after you receive Holy Communion, then after Mass. Prayers of thanksgiving written by St. Thomas Aquinas. And what's interesting is, so yesterday I was at a Holy Hour with my mom, and I was looking through the diocesan hymnal that they have up here in the Diocese of Marquette, and they actually have the prayers. They have the St. Thomas Aquinas prayers before Mass, before we receive Holy Communion, after we receive Holy Communion, and after Mass. And it's the same as my hand missal. Like, you're looking at my traditional hand missal by St. Andrew's, and you're seeing these prayers. And I mean, there's a little bit of worded change, but the context is the same. I mean, they're the prayers. And I'm like, that's impressive. Coming almost, from when I was in seminary with this diocese almost 20 years ago to we can't speak about Aquinas to now they're bringing them back, and that they're seeing the errors, they're seeing the fruits that this angelic doctor brought to the faith. When you pray these prayers, when you chant these hymns, they bring fruit. They're prayer. They're efficacious. They will help you. It's not just for pomp and circumstance. It's not just for something for the priest to do while he's swinging around a thurible. They're prayers, and they're beautiful prayers. I love, that's the one of the few things amongst many things I love about St. Thomas Aquinas is his hymns, his Eucharistic devotion. And I mean, what was it? One of his, many quotes was, I know everything I know by kneeling before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. Something to those effects. And that's it right there. That's the answer. If you're struggling, if you're going through some hard times, if you need some help, if you need some clarity, go spend an hour or two before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. That's a great start. May not give you all the answers you need right away, but that's a great foundation to start helping you get back on track.
Yeah. And of course, he wrote the office for Corpus Christi.
Yes. Which he did have some competition for that.
Yeah, he did.
And it's a shame. It is a shame because as a Franciscan, I would love to have known, I think the church in a whole would have loved to have known what Blessed Duns Scotus wrote, just to see what he came up with, because it was St. Thomas Aquinas and no, it was not. It was St. Bonaventure, right? Yeah, St. Bonaventure and St. Thomas Aquinas. The St. Bonaventure, they were both charged with writing the office for Corpus Christi, and after St. Thomas Aquinas presented his office, the St. Bonaventure tore up what he had prepared. To this day, we don't know what he wrote. It's a shame. As a Franciscan, it's kind of like we admitted defeat a little too early, but
well, I don't know. I mean, I've always.
It's a beautiful office.
Bonaventure was more a Dominican than a Franciscan.
I mean, he did have a lot of Dominican tendencies. He did. I think the only thing that really saved him as a Franciscan was his charism of humility and intimacy. I think those were the only two really things that, if you see when you read St. Bonaventure, you see a lot of humility in his writing, and you see the intimacy. It's almost like St. John the Evangelist a little bit, where two hearts are communicating with each other rather than two minds. you get that sense. Now, it's still theological, it's still intellectual, don't get me wrong, but just that perspective. And that's one of the things I picked up on reading St. Bonaventure is, and understanding the Franciscan charism of intimacy. And I think the only other order that really has us beat on intimacy, and I've already talked about this before, so it should be no shocker, is the Carmelites. But yeah, but it is beautiful. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the truly best, greatest doctors of the church. He just, you can't read enough of him, and you shouldn't want to read it all. You should want to discover St. Thomas Aquinas. Start out easy. There's introductions, there's catechisms that can help you get into the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas. But don't try to read it all. Try to discover certain aspects of what he wrote and just embrace that. You know, it's you won't be what's the word I'm looking for? You won't be I can't, I just blanked on the word. Wow. You won't be sorry. There we go. Yes, truly live and unscripted.
Yeah. So was there anything in the headlines this week that jumped out at you?
Oh, yes. What was it? See, it was I should have written it down. Pope Francis talking about sin and crimes. No, he's talked about this before, and I think we've covered it a little bit before. But it's very yeah. My mom just reminded me. So that homosexuality should not be a crime. Sodomy should not be a crime. And then he's going to visit a country that is predominantly Islam, where it is a crime. And he's going to have ecumenical dialogue with these leaders of this country to put on a good, New World Order face. But yet, he's coming out and saying it shouldn't be a crime, but then he's supporting these countries where it is a crime, and he's contradicting himself within the humanitarian laws that he's set. And obviously, St. Thomas Aquinas has talked about this, right? What is moral and just, and what is moral and just and right in the church, and moral and just and right in the civil law, and what can be criminal, and both morally and civilly. I mean, he goes on and on and on about that. So it's just interesting, because what we see is a complete polarization and a complete lack of empathy of a man who's in the office of the highest shepherd. And he has no idea what he's doing. Or if he does know what he's doing, then he is malice. Then there is a malice, diabolical control over him. If he knows what he's doing. If he doesn't know what he's doing, if he's just pandering and just trying to, be nice and save face, and he's just saying things that he thinks he'll get by and without ruffling feathers, whatever. But if he truly is intent on what he's doing, then yeah, there is some serious allegations there that need to be addressed.
Well, I think it's interesting that was at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, he had reiterated a traditional definition of marriage, and he had corrected himself to say, because what he originally had said was that homosexuality shouldn't be criminalized, but homosexuality is a sin.
Right.
And he did rightly correct himself on the question of homosexuality per se itself is not a sin. To enact and to act out is, because the church's teaching is that any intimacy outside of holy matrimony, which is defined as being between a man and a woman, is sinful. It doesn't matter, irrespective of orientation or who it's with or what's done. It's all sinful. But I was surprised that that he'd made that misstep himself earlier in the week. But also rather surprised and relieved that he gave that traditional definition of marriage.
Well, I think he had to. I think some of his advisors pulled him aside and said, "Hey, you need to clarify on this. You need to. Otherwise, we're going to have a civil war like you haven't seen in the church." I mean, because it's the ammunition that the social justice clergy need to go paint the streets rainbow, and make all the churches rainbow flag. I mean, that was pretty much like they were ready to go with that, with what Pope Francis said in the beginning of the week. They were like, just okay, we got our marching orders, let's do this. And then you see the conservatives starting to get up and whoa, holy, your holiness, there was a great tension early in the week, and he corrected himself. He eased up a little bit on it, because I think if he didn't do that, if he didn't make that correction, we would probably be going in a direction that I don't know if we could see the outcome of it being good.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it also put in mind the situation that we discussed last week with the Church of England.
That
on the one hand hasn't altered the official doctrine of marriage, but is giving license to bless what are essentially generally presumed to be intimate unions that are not marriage as defined doctrinally. So it's all symptomatic of this topsy-turvy world that we're currently living in. That one minute one thing is wrong and then the contrary is right. A lot of things just aren't making sense.
The worst thing is we have this modern technology that we know everything the instant it pretty much happens. Like, it's not to say like this wasn't a problem. I think people disconnect generations because of the technology. The church has always had problems. The world has always had problems, very much like this. This is not something new. We've had these problems within the world and societies and religion for millennia. The only problem is the general public rarely ever knew about it because there wasn't the mass media of information to be put out there. So, because I was chuckling this morning when I was saying my offices, remembering the story of the old hermit priest that was living out in the country. And this was back in like the 1800s or whatever. And one of his brothers would come along every once in a while, just to check up on him. And the only question he asked him was, "Who's the Pope?" That was like one of the only questions. I talked for a little bit, but he's like, "Who's the Pope?" Just so I know, so I can say it in my mass. Because often, you wouldn't know who the Pope was.
Yeah.
A Pope dies, another, there's the sede vacante time frame, and so it's just interesting because you look at the technology, you look at the mass information and what we're dealing with, and it's almost plaguing our scrupulosity more, and we're sensitized. We're not desensitized. We're hypersensitized to it, and we no longer can be. We're desensitized to the faith. We should be hypersensitized, or actually, we should just be sensitized to the faith, desensitized to the world, and we see that kind of reverse taking place. And so it's just kind of interesting thinking about that. this morning. It's just, I think the problem is not so much the subject matter of what's going on. It's just because we have the mass media availability of information that we're focused on the wrong things at maybe the wrong times. Just
and I think there's a lot of truth in that, and yet there are certain sort of cultural perceptions that haven't changed, so that people tend to believe the first thing they read or hear or see, rather than inquire further, and are more reluctant to change their mind, no matter how strong the subsequent evidence to the contrary is. And there's this, and as well, I think the church has been, as she always generally has been, slow to harness new technology and new phenomena. And I think with regard to things like Facebook and social media, Instagram, etc., it's surprising how many bishops, for example, don't publish their sermons on the internet, don't engage in programs like this, don't comment, don't teach.
Well, to be fair, Your Grace, how many bishops currently do you think you would want teaching or publicizing their sermons? I wouldn't put that number very high. So maybe it's a good thing most of them don't.
Well, to be honest, I don't know a majority of enough of them to be able to really say. This is my point. We're kind of left waiting for an article or for them to be referenced or whatever to really know what the position is on anything. Because I think as this pontificate continues, people are beginning to see that the emperor has no clothes.
Oh yes, I mean, and that's the beautiful thing about this pontificate is, he truly is the guardian of tradition, because the traditional chapels have been flourishing. The ones that are established and known, from Sede Vacante all the way through SSPX to FSSP to Institute of Christ the King. I mean, they're flourishing. Any of the chapels that are open, they're pretty much filled to the brim. So he has done some good in that regard, getting people away from modernism and into tradition. I don't think that's his intention, but
yeah, I doubt it very much. Yeah. Now you said, before that you thought Aquinas wouldn't say very much if he was around today.
I don't think he would, because studying. I haven't studied Aquinas as nearly as much as probably you have, Your Grace, or others out there. But I think just knowing his mannerisms, I don't think he would say much. I don't think if he was around right now, I think he would, if asked, he would give his opinion. He would give his treatise. He would, maybe write something or whatever. But he would maintain his faith. He wouldn't, the Pope's doing versus populum now, and we're saying the vernacular, and, what was a sin in my era is no longer a sin now, so it's okay. He wouldn't give into it. He would see the heresy for what it is, a heresy, and he would say, well, this is a terrible time. It's a shame that we're going through this, but I don't think he would be as adamant, because, he was very quiet. He was not, someone to just go off the cuff and share his thoughts and opinions. He was very, he was an introvert. You know, how he got the name the dumb ox in school, because everybody thought he was stupid because he wouldn't say much. But then, you know, he's having conversations with St. Paul and St. Peter and you know, our Lord in his mind, and writing these treaties, and you know, he's putting together all these great works of the church. It's because people will judge you for your outward actions, of course, but if they don't know you inwardly, if they don't know your personality, then they can't make a full judgment. And I think, not to make a judgment on St. Thomas Aquinas, but I just think that knowing enough about his personality, his mannerism, I don't think he would say much. I think if he was here, if he was brought back, you know, and if he was there to make corrections and help support the traditional clergy and maybe try to band us together a little bit, how can we do things better to be better faithful clergy, better faithful religious, you know, work on that regard. But I don't think he would say much. I think he would let his testimony of action, just his subtle way of carrying the faith, speak volumes.
So you don't think he would have engaged much with social media?
I don't think so. Because he wasn't much of a big social speaker in the universities. You know, when they had the platforms. Now, I could be wrong. But from my understanding, he wasn't that big of a speaker, public speaker in the universities. I mean, his sermons, and that's the one thing I do wish, because I don't think there's many of his sermons around, because I don't think he preached terribly much, because most of the time he said private masses. Huh?
For a Dominican.
Right. I mean, I think most of the time he said private masses. I don't think he said too many public masses. I could be wrong about that, because I know he would say a mass, he would offer a mass, and then he would serve one of the brother priests' masses. And that's a beautiful thing too. His humility right there as a priest. You know, he would offer his holy sacrifice to the mass, and then he would go and serve for a brother priest and humble himself to the office of a server, to the acolyte. And then say his officers carry on his day, and then probably go to his study to continue his works. But so that's just the beauty of it, right? Like, and that's why, in our small community, I love being able to serve masses. Like, when I serve for Bishop Kelly, or I serve for yourself, or when we're at the friar, we have a visiting priest, serve for them. Because as a priest, it puts me still to know the mass, to serve, to be in a position that I can serve. Instead of being served, now I get to serve. Because as a priest, you're constantly serving. And it's just a beautiful thing to just meditate and reflect on, is that no matter what you are, your state of life, humility, servitude are still our key points that we should be relying on. Even if we're in a state where we're being served, like the centurion, right? We heard, was it last Sunday? Lord, I'm not worthy I should enter under my roof. Remembering that even if we're in a state where we're being served, we can still find ways where we can serve others. And that's the beautifulness that I think St. Thomas Aquinas brings to us, that he wrote all these beautiful documents, but he still kept his Dominican religious life, his vows and his religious life were first and foremost. Everything he wrote, everything he did was up at straw, as he said, as I once attributed to saying. But if living the life as a Dominican was his greatest happiness, was his greatest achievement, remaining faithful to the vows. And that's just something beautiful. It's simple, but it just goes to show us, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your life, God just calls us to remain simple and obedient.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, myself and Bishop Kelly served your first mass.
Yeah, there was no pressure whatsoever for me for that. It's already been enough. Here I am, brand new priest, saying my first mass, and I have two bishops serving my mass. Like, if I make one mistake, a crosier's coming out and I'm getting whacked.
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
But it was wonderful though. Just, in that humility, and it was a great honor and privilege to be able to offer the Holy Sacrifice of Mass, and to have two bishops, to have two men who are successors of the apostles standing, supporting me, kneeling with me at the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, truly solidifying the priesthood. So I often, reflect on that as much as I can. And, the I am not worthy part comes into mind so much. Lord, I'm not worthy. But still, it was a beautiful Mass 4 years later. And it's a wonderful testimony to the faith. I mean, only Catholicism can bring you this type of stuff. Nobody else has it on this earth. We're the only game in town that has it.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts about, Archbishop Ganswein's book?
I haven't. He published it, didn't he, or no?
Yeah, it's been published. It's not yet. I think again we're still waiting for the English.
Right.
But there's been various articles. I mean, there are that many articles about it, but there's no point in reading it.
I mean, yeah, it's just articles and articles, and I mean, it's interesting because I think, why are all these books being published first and foremost, right? I mean, if they're not going to give the deep, juicy secrets that we're all, on the edge of our seat waiting for, then what's the point? I think maybe sometimes they're just trying to, close a chapter in life, put a okay, Benedict XVI, we're moving on from that. Here's his book. Here's Archbishop Ganswein's writings. Okay, we can move on. You guys can read this. You can speculate till the cows come home all day long. Everybody can get in their camps and marinate over that. But what's happening? It's a distraction. I think it's more distracting than it is bringing closure or some type of Indiana Jones type of the finding of the Holy Grail, the lost art. Where this is the missing piece of the secret. We got it. No, they won't reveal that. They're not gonna show their hand when they're winning. The old poker trick. I mean, or they think they're winning. No, I think this is more distracting than it is good, because then people are going to get caught up. They're going to read these books. They're going to get caught up in that. They're going to talk amongst each other. They're going to argue amongst each other. Well, yet Pope Francis and his Pazzi are going to get away with what else? We still have the Synod. We still have the Synod of Synods and Synods. Oh my! What's going on with that?
Well, of course, that's one of the things this week that Francis has finally spoken up about the situation in Germany, or about the German bishops, much to their chagrin, Bishop Batsing, who's their sort of leader. I think I assume he's the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Germany, but he's now complaining that, well, why didn't Francis say this to us when we were in Rome? Which actually is a fair dinkum comment.
Oh, yeah.
Because it did appear that he was almost deliberately avoiding them while they were in Rome. But it's again, this chaos. It's demonstrating that there is no consensus even amongst those who would so drastically seek to change the faith.
Well, I think it's because prayer is working.
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at it, our prayers are working. Getting on your knees and praying the rosary, going to holy hour, making acts of reparation, doing all these wonderful things that we're supposed to be doing as Catholics. And the amount of people that are actually starting to do them, it's working. So let's amp it up. Let's keep on going. We're winning this fight. Believe it or not, we are actually winning this because they're not getting away with things they want to get away with. They may be saying stuff all day long. They may be writing documents. Oh my gosh, a document that says all this. And you may have some rogue clergy going out there doing some sacrilegious or heretical things, but they're still rogue. They're not the majority. So our prayers are working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a positive look to take on it.
Yeah. Well, I think as you were saying earlier, the continued growth of traditional Catholics means that gradually, as we spoke about a few weeks ago, gradually more is being poured into that treasury of graces which the Church requires in order to be effective in witness and in the spiritual realm. The more people who are saying novenas, praying rosaries, attending holy hour, hearing mass, etc., and who are properly predisposed toward the devotion, so that it is, they are actually praying with, or actually praying the prayers, rosaries, etc., and praying with, trying to match the intentions of the priests, the traditional priests. And I think that's something sometimes in traditional circles that maybe is forgotten, that actually, from the traditional perspective, nobody wants schism. Nobody wants actually for the Church to break up and fall apart. What we desire is that all things be restored in Christ, to quote St Pius X's motto.
We want sanctity. We want sanctity. That's all we want. We want the beauty, the glory, the grandeur of the Holy Church. Well, yeah, Pius X said.
But this constant sort of allegation that the traditionalists are schismatic, and that's actually the last thing that traditionalists are. All traditionalists want is for the Church to be restored. And if we distance ourselves from the institution and the hierarchy, it's done purely to preserve our faith, both the faith and people's personal faith, because we've seen a number of souls who have gone astray, who confuse worldly values with theology and novel ideas of doctrine, etc., and who regard the Church in the same way as they regard the world of politics, where everything is presented left and right, conservative and liberal, and progressive, and so on and so forth. It's whereas of course the truth is that the vast majority of us just want to be Catholics.
Well,
Catholics as our immediate forebears were Catholics, and as our ancestors were Catholic. We just want the authentic Mass. We want the authentic sacraments, and we want that consistency and continuity with the faith and approach of the past that we read, in all the popes before Vatican II and their writings, in the magisterium, and all the writings of the doctors of the Church and the great theologians, etc.
We just, it's the beauty. I want to be able to have the Mass in the faith of St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Bonaventure, St. Dominic, St. Francis of Assisi. I want to be able to say that the faith that I've been taught and the faith as a priest that I am teaching is a faith that St. Paul and St. Peter would be proud to hear come from my mouth and see in my life. That's what I want. I don't want this watered down, compromised, whatever. It's like going back to, the whole schism and being separated thing. It's like, think about it like this. If the building's on fire and there's people trapped in the building, as firefighter, I used to be a firefighter for 4 or 5 years, so I know a thing or two about this. But, so we're the ones that are called. We go away and we try to rescue the people. And if the people don't want to go, we do everything we can to try to get them out. We'll drag them out. We'll do our best. But at the end of the day, if they want to stay in there, if they're going to make themselves, if they're going to barricade themselves in there, we're not going to jeopardize our lives. If they're adamant they don't want to go, we're going to leave. We're like, well, we've done everything we can. We can't force you out, and we're not going to risk our own life just to save you. So we have to make that decision. Our safety versus the safety of someone who doesn't want to be saved. And the building's on fire. So you're not going to stand next to a building that's on fire. You're going to move away from it, right? So we move away. We set up a secure area to attack the fire. And that's what the traditional groups are doing. We're trying to save the people that are in this heretical fire from the burning building, but yet we can't enter it ourselves because then we're going to get burned. And and that's the thing. I mean, take the puns intended, I guess, on that one. But that's the mentality that a traditional should see it as. We're trying to save souls. We're trying to save lives from this burning heresy that is modernism. And we can only do that from a safe, secure area while this building, and now buildings, I guess you could say, are on fire, engulfed in the flames. Paul VI said, the smoke of hell has entered the Vatican. Well, guess what? The flames are currently in there now. Where there was smoke, now there's fire. So, it's not that we want to be removed from the building. It's just right now we cannot, for our safety and for our salvation, until the fire is put out. And that can only be put out by the workings of sanctity, the prayers, the amendment to life, reparation, and change to tradition, the restoration of the faith, and the refuting of heresy. That's what needs to come from the Vatican in order for us to be able to put this fire out and go back in and take the burnt ashes away and rebuild Christendom.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. If a building's on fire, invariably, if a building's on fire, you don't stay. You don't stay in the building. You get out to safety. Yeah. And as you say, and again, we know that there are those of a traditional persuasion who try, despite all the odds, as it were, to stay where they are. But ultimately, it serves them no purpose.
It's like the diocesan clergy that were given permission to do the TLM. Those are like the rookie firefighters. They're still green behind the ears, and they get their full and fully engulfed structure fire with entrapments. And they're running in, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna go save lives. We're gonna either gun hole." And then unfortunately, I'm not saying this about all rookies, but unfortunately, those are gonna be your casualties. If you're not assessing the situation before you run in, if you're all zeal and you don't have the know-how, the experience that to support you, your zeal is going to run out and you're going to find yourself in a trouble situation. So, just to elaborate a little bit more on that, and we see what happened, right? The diocesan TLMs got shut down. They got burned. And now they're, the RIT team has to go in. The rapid intervention team, those more experienced firefighters, got to go in and now save them and bring them to safety, bring them out of the burning building, bring them to safety. And that's what us, the traditional, irregular clergy are doing. We're bringing them out to safety. We're trying to rescue them, help them, show them how to be Catholic, how to be a priest in the faith in these interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, next week is my birthday, and 2 days before we, respectively, fly out to the Philippines.
Wait, when's your birthday?
Next Saturday.
That's the 4th.
Yeah, 4th of February.
I thought we were flying out on the 5th.
You're flying out on the 5th, and I'm flying out on the 6th.
Ah, right. So,
hopefully, we both arrive on the 7th.
That's right. Wait. You take the high road, I take the low road, and I get to the before you.
Yeah, hopefully 7th within hours of each other.
I know, right? And that's funny. We're crossing each other actually over the Atlantic too.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
To reach the same, we both change, and we both arrive at the same terminal in Manila. But
yeah.
So next week, because it really will sort of depend, aside from the fact of those things, what the state of play is with regard to my preparations for flying out. So I just want to warn everyone now. There may not be an episode next week, but Father and I are determined that we will try and broadcast from the Philippines if we possibly can.
Yes.
And I'm hoping to perhaps vlog a little from the Philippines as well, so that you can see the chapels and the communities and the people in the Philippines. So if I can persuade them, because they're usually quite shy, but if I can persuade them to be interviewed on camera, then I will. And I'm delighted to say that the Tagapo Chapel restoration, we've now been promised the remaining funds.
Oh, wonderful!
So I'm not sure if the monies will be there while we're in the Philippines, but I think certainly by before March, we should have those final donations in that will we'll finish the project off. Work's already been done. The first phase was completed yesterday. So new ceiling. So the roof has been repaired. A new ceiling has been installed. New lighting has been installed. The east end has been prepared, ready for the reception of a new altar, which I think was coming yesterday. It's already received a new crucifix. I think there's a plan for a reredos of some kind. And then what's left to do is a final plaster and paint job, restore the choir balcony, and attend to the windows at the front of the building and the metalwork, re the gates and the grills, etc. So that's still left to do, but I am delighted to say we have actually, or we will have raised all the money necessary, which is fantastic. So thank you to our benefactors, and they will be remembered regularly at Mass in the chapel, and we will share with you, photos of the work that's been done, and show you the community and the surrounding area and all that from Tagapo when we're there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. If anyone, I'm not, if you would like to contribute to offset the expenses of myself, or indeed Father Thomas, please use the links below. It's not cheap to fly from the north to the south hemispheres, but any help there would be much appreciated. Thank you to those of you who have given. You have, and yes, generously. We're very grateful.
Many masses and offices have been offered, and thanksgiving for your generosity.
Don't forget that through theoldroman.com, as some people have, you can request a series of Gregorian masses to be offered. That's one way of providing benefaction and for the benefit of souls. So if there are souls that for whom you would like 30 consecutive masses to be offered for, then do visit theoldroman.com chantry page, and you can find details there. And otherwise, of course, links underneath the screen for general donations as well. And if you haven't already considered, then please do think about becoming a regular patron of the channel, which you can do via patreon.com/oldromantv. And again, the link is below in the show notes.
Yes.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our time.
Pray a blessing, your grace.
Of course. Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Sit nomen Domini benedictum.
Et hoc nunc et saecula.
Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fecit caelum et terra.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you as always for joining us, for supporting us, and do look out for special editions on the channel during mine and Father Tom's visitation to the Philippines in February. Are you looking forward to it, Father?
I am. I'm anxiously awaiting. It's the flight is probably my most terrifying feat right now. I'm not a big fan of flying. I've only flown 4 times in my life prior to this. Yeah, so I don't fly much. I'm a road trip guy. I've driven across the United States many times. I love road trips. Flying, I'm a little bit uneasy about, but this is for a good cause, and I'm looking forward to it. So if I can get through the flight, yeah, it's gonna be a fun month in the Philippines.
Excellent.
So for the last time on the this side of the Atlantic and Pacific, right?
Yeah. Well, then it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
And we will see you all very soon. Take care. God bless. And thank you.